We're going to hear from a gentleman named John. You've probably already seen his shirt. Okay, sitting in the front row, bright and colorful. I said, I love that shirt. He said, hey, if nothing else, they're going to remember my shirt. Okay? But I have a feeling you're going to remember a lot more than just the shirt. I met John recently. Last name's Qualls. John Qualls. So I met John recently over lunch, and we were talking about, the Department of Revenue. We're talking about the transformation, organizational culture. We got into this conversation about purpose. And you guys know our purpose. I've reminded you of it this morning. But he has an interesting view of the world. One that I appreciate greatly. He's a tech entrepreneur. Been very successful. Multiple companies. He can probably tell you all about those. If you've ever heard of the 1150 Coding Academy, okay? He's one of their leaders until just recently, I guess early this year is when you started Purposely, or late 18. But he had a quote in the Indianapolis Business Journal that I had read when he was talking about the formation of Purposely, okay, his new company. He talked about the skills gap. And I won't quote it directly because I probably won't get it right. I don't have it in front of me. But everybody's talking about, jobs and workforce and skills, and it's all about the skills gap. And we got to train people to have more skills so that they can have jobs. And John, very accurately, I would say, said in the IBJ, the skills gap is 25% of the problem, which is not the majority, which says, what's the real issue? Everybody's just talking about skills. But that was 25% of the problem. The other 75% is more about cultural misalignment and misalignment with purpose. Okay? And it's so true. You've got to be in the right position, in the right culture. What's the purpose? Why are you here? Okay? Does your purpose match the purpose of the organization? If the answer is no, you've got to figure something out. For some, that means doing something else. But for others, it means, reevaluating, redefining, figuring out what it takes to pair those up. Okay. So I'm going to let John do the rest. So please give a huge door welcome to John Qualls.
It's working fine. There you go. Is this microphone? Yeah. There we go. Maybe I probably won't be able to go that far, but I'll keep coming back and forth, right? So, human capital analytics is a problem with purpose, right? I'm going to focus more on the problem with purpose and less on the human capital analytics. You're going to see how that all comes together. Well, let me start a little bit. And go back to 1990. In 1990, at 2 o'clock in the morning, hundreds of miles from any coast, I was in the Indian Ocean, and I was on a ship. And it was 2 o'clock in the morning, I was looking up. And I grew up here in Indianapolis, on the inner west side in Hallville. Some of you may know where that is. It's where all the rich people in town live. So we're over there. And because I live kind of close to the city, right, there's always this light pollution. So I never really could see the stars. But I'm on this ship and I'm looking up and I can actually see the Milky Way. I can see the Milky Way and I just can't believe how many stars there are and how really small that I am compared to this huge galaxy in front of me. And to know that the Milky Way is like a grain of sand compared to where the real universe was. So I was just kind of looking up, like, I can't believe how many stars there are. I could do that. But the stars went all the way from horizon to horizon, right? Because again, we're hundreds of miles from anywhere in 1990. This is during a Desert Storm, Desert Shield time frame. And so I'm on the ship on the top, and the ship is actually underway. There's no moon, there's just these stars. And I can see that the ocean is kind of black. And I remember that the propeller on the ship was 2 stories tall. And we were underway, and you'd actually feel the rumble underneath your feet. And the whole ship is kind of going like this, in front of the ship's going into waves. And I can see this. And when I look to the left and to the right, all I can see is other ships, right? All these warships are all lined up at 2 o'clock in the morning at night. And none of them have their lights on. There's no lights. All lights out. And they're all underway. They're all kind of moving along, right? They're all lined up. And then ahead of us is some other ships, right? And behind us is another line of ships. And over the next 15 minutes, all these ships just start to line up, right? Across the ocean. As far as you can see is all these ships. They're all lined up across the ocean. And they're all lined up. There's kind of a sense of anticipation. And I'm just kind of looking, you can't hear anything. You just see, as far as you see these ships, and you see them out there. And then an F-18 Hornet runs in front of us, like call it the Top Gun moment, right? And it literally just goes streaking in front of all these ships and breaks the sound barrier right in front of you. Now, if any of you have ever heard the sound barrier, right, it's like a thunderclap, but when it happens in front of you, 500 feet, it literally is it shakes the atoms in your body, right? It's such a loud noise, right? It literally just shakes everything. It's just amazing to see this technology is running fast in front of you, how fast. And when it breaks the sound barrier, it's actually this vapor that happens, right? So it's just amazing to watch that happen right in front of us. And as soon as that died down, then there was actually shots to my left and there were shots to my right. You could hear these shots going off, right? And after you heard those shots, then it was like the whole night just lit up. Because while there wasn't any lights, we did have these chemical glow lights. We'd break them and you'd shake them and they'd have different colors. And all along to my left and right is all these lights like a Christmas tree, all light up, and all this is shouting. And then there's like this buzz, like someone had kicked a hornet's nest, right? When they kicked that hornet's nest, all of a sudden dozens of helicopters just came out of all these lights and then just started jumping around like hummingbirds, right? Again, no lights, all in the dark, right? All this moving, all in the dark, right? It was literally, I never felt more part of something significant, right? And understanding how I couldn't believe I was part of this, right? Being part of this thing. Now, what was going on was it was the largest U.S. naval armada since World War II, right? So that was what was going on. And all this, and what was happening is we were actually replenishing all the ships, right? So you had all these battleships, you had all these civilian ships and merchant marines and all this all coordinated together. And those shots were actually this little gun that shoots out a string tied to a rope, right? Tied to a cord, tied to a rope, tied to a cable. And they were connecting all these ships all together at night in the dark, underway, not nuts, all moving, all together, all lined up in the dark. Right? It's called a horizontal replenishment. So they shoot this, and then once they connect all the ships, they have, beans, bullets, and bandages, right? So all that logistical stuff is moving, and it starts filling up all the ships, all coordinated at night. But to make it a little more difficult, instead of doing horizontal replenishment, why don't we also do vertical replenishment? So all those helicopters, they were going from ship to ship and picking up things and dropping them down. I'll never forget one particular helicopter. It was just amazing to watch the ballet, and it was actually a female pilot, right? I'll never forget her. And she would just come in like this, and it just, not even touch down on remember the ship is moving, right? So she's got to do this while the ship is moving. She comes in and actually hooks that equipment, and then flies backwards like this, and at the last moment she turns and puts it down and then flies backwards this way. Right? In the middle of dozens of other helicopters, all underway, all moving around. Right? It was just an amazing experience. And I remember the next day, I was talking to my officer in charge. His name was Major John A. Toolin Jr. Right? People that you remember. John A. Toolin Jr. Retired as a lieutenant general just a couple years ago. But I asked him. I said, Major. Normally, a ship stops, another ship comes up, they connect it, they move this equipment. Well, why did we do all this? He said, well, we had left, we'd been at sea for 60 days. This is before the internet, right? So we left, come over to some country that I would never have found on a map prior. I didn't know what Kuwait was. Right? I was only 20 years old. I didn't know where Kuwait. We left, we'd been at sea for 60 days, and we thought it was just a trip, and now all of a sudden it's a war. And there was just a tremendous amount of fear that was going on around everyone. And what happened is there started to become this kind of breakdown where people started saying your department and my department and that ship and this ship. And we started losing contact about who we were. So the military leadership said it was time for us to remember that we were actually part of a team and that we need to do something hard. And if we're going to do something hard, why don't we do this, instead of just by themselves, why don't we actually have them underway? And if we're going to have them underway, why don't we do multiple ships? And if there's going to be multiple ships, why don't we do it at night with no lights? And then let's do helicopters. Let's do all that. And let's just coordinate this between all these, not only the U.S., but there's a coalition, right? So there's other branches from other countries. Let's just do all that and make it really hard. And it worked. We really came together. No one really looked at that anymore, right? It really became this cohesive team. And really an opportunity I felt like I was tremendously proud of what we were able to do. And this was before the internet, right? So there was no, I'm sorry, it's not on Instagram. There's no likes. There's no videos. We had no smartphones. Matter of fact, I know that it took us 2 weeks of 18 hours a day to actually coordinate all that. And we were jumping around on helicopters and boats between ships and coordinating all this stuff. We had computers, but they were really more for printing checklists than they were for actually coordinating anything. But all that stuff was done prior to that. And that was really kind of an end of a generation, right? Because kind of right after the 1990s, all these other things started to happen, some real changes around the world. But that was a tremendous, let's see if I can get this right here. So now if we look at the last 30 years, we've had this unprecedented change that's happened in our society. If you were back 200 years ago, and they said, how do you communicate in the future, 200 years? They said, well, we have this piece of glass, and we tap on it. And then other people in the world have this glass, and then they tap on it, and that's how we communicate. What is that? That makes no sense, right? What if 20 years ago, if I told you that the world's largest taxi service owned no taxis? But I don't think Uber does. Right? What if I said the world's largest hoteler owns no hotels? I don't think Airbnb owns any. World's largest movie theater? Do they own any movie theaters? I don't think Netflix does. Right? So that's just in 20 years, right? So there's this tremendous change that's happened. We have more humans than ever, but we have less humanity. We're more connected than ever, right? But we're lonely. The highest level of loneliness ever. Skyrocketing suicide rates, particularly in young men, 3.5 to 5 times more than women. We have all this going on. What's going on here? I like to think of it, what these really are just the symptoms. What we really need to find out is what's the real core problems. I think there's some investigators here. I know in technology, I have this thing we call the 5 whys, right? What root cause analysis? What happened? Well, why did that happen? Well, because of this. Well, then why did that happen? Well, because of this. And eventually, you stop asking why, and you start down to the actual real problem. You can actually start solving something when you get to that. We used to, for thousands of years, we were built for 5D communication, right? All the senses were in play, right? All of them, 3D, see how you look, smile, smile. Right? We were built for that, right? And now we got this 1D dimension. Of course there's something missing, right? There's just this human piece that's missing that we've done. Now we can't go back, right? I know that we can't go back. There's no DeLoreans. We can't go back. And by the way, today's somebody's good old days, right? So we have to recognize that piece. The speed and volume of communication has surpassed humanity's ability to comprehend it. Right? Used to, you send a letter out, it would take months to get there, then weeks, and then days. And then we had all these other pieces of communication, right? So this communication is like a hurricane that comes to us so fast, right? And we don't have time to really think about it, right? Yeah, our initial reaction is a shallow one, right? Where's the third or fourth time thinking about something, right? And it really kind of comes down to this crisis of purpose. When I think of what some of the root issues are, is a crisis of purpose. So let's break that down a little bit. So I lived in Japan for a year. In Japan, they have a 3,000-year-old philosophy called Ikigai. And I know that I'm butchering if there's anyone here, I'm sorry. Right? Ikigai, I believe is how it's pronounced. And what it kind of translates to is, why do you get up in the morning? Right? Why do you get up in the morning? And for them, it was, what are you good at and what are you passionate about? Right? That's kind of horizontal. And what does the world need and willing to reward you for that? Right? And that worked great for 3,000 years in Japan. It's kind of broken today. And some of the reason it's broken is because for 3,000 years, they were this isolated community, right? An island in the Pacific, in which it had its own values, its own culture, social, right? Culture and all those other pieces. And then when we became connected to the rest of the world, all that started getting broken down, right? And so that's kind of some issues. So is purpose really in the middle of those things? I want to focus on two of them today. What you're good at and passion. And this is the area I believe that we're having some real challenges with. So the first one, what are you good at? Education and training, right? So we think about education somehow has fallen into about your degree attainment and not about being actualized, right? And we think about the skills. I think, Commissioner talked about the skills gap. I was trying to find the skills gap, and I figured out I could solve the skills gap, right? It was this purpose piece. And so often someone would tell me that education and training is the same. I'm going to fix that problem right now. I'm going to fix that right now. So you have some kids in school, and the school sends back a note. It says, tomorrow in health class, we're going to have sex education. We're going to let you know in case they come home with some questions, so you'll be prepared. You're probably okay with that. Same scenario, letter comes back tomorrow, we're going to have some sex training. Probably not okay with that. That was some more, right? So let's not confuse education and training. And sometimes we educate humans and we train dogs, right? That's also the wrong term. So you'll remember that, right? Every time someone says it, right? But what's missing in the middle here is talent, right? We've somehow forgot this part where we have to understand what our talent is. Everybody has talent. It's all a rare talent. Wrong. Everyone has talent. And part of the journey is discovering your talent. And once you understand your talent, what do you put on top of it? Your skills. You have your talent, and then your skills, and then you're going to point those at something, right? And you're going to point them not at passion. Stop chasing passion. Right? I can love golf. I can have a real passion for golf. I happen to be a triple-digit golfer. Anybody knows what that is? The world doesn't need triple-digit golfers, and you have to pay to play. So sometimes, you suck at it, you might want to make it a hobby, it's not your career, right? So, but problems, right? 80% of your income comes from solving problems. Commissioner talked about problems, right? In the 1980s, there was an experiment they did called the biodome. What they did is, I think it was in Arizona, some of you may remember this, they created this big sealed environment, and they put these scientists in there for a year. And it was completely separated from, had its own water, everything was completely, like a whole different planet here. It's called the biodome. And they put them in there and locked them up for a year. But they didn't make it. In 10 months, they had to take them out. I think they were afraid they were going to starve to death, right? And so there's a lot of, what is it? You win, right? Or you learn, right? Because failure is an event, not a person, right? Let's not forget that. And so there are a lot of lessons learned, right? So I always, the story where the two of the scientists were looking at some of the lessons, and they're at this diner. I like to think of it as a diner somewhere in Indiana, because I think there's a lot of good wisdom that comes out of diners in Indiana. And the two scientists, one says, all the trees died. Oh, well, you have a water problem? Oh, water was perfect. pH levels. Well, maybe the soil's bad. No, soil was great. We had all the buggies in there and all the stuff that's supposed to be in soil. Right? Oh, was it the sunlight? Oh, sunlight was perfect. All this science, the sunlight was perfect. Right? But the bugs? No bugs, only good bugs. And so what happened? Well, they took off like gangbusters. Those trees were growing. It was great. Then they all fell down and died. And they couldn't figure out. Now I like to think that there was this crusty old farmer sitting by and said, "Excuse me, whippersnappers." I actually had to look up whippersnappers to make sure it wasn't a slur, right? I'm not sure where the PC police are, right? I had to look that one up. He said, I know why your trees died. And they kind of looked over and like, yeah, sure you do. Why is that? He goes, well, you forgot the wind. I'm like, wind? He said, yeah, see, when you have wind, when this thing is growing, it needs the wind, right, for these little microfractures, and that's what strengthens the trunk, right? It makes the foundation. The reason all your trees died is they all grew up, but the trunk wasn't strong enough to hold the weight, and so they all fell over and died. Right? And humanity, we tend to do the best. We really tend to rise. We got a little headwind in front of us, right? Individually and as an organization, right? We need that. We need these problems. We need that struggle. Because when you take it away, we tend to fall on our face, right? Kind of create some human dramas that usually come out of that, right? So we need these problems. They're important. Your problems are important. So maybe another way of looking at purpose is when your talent that you discovered and your skills which you've developed are directed to a problem or cause that you care about. And the world needs it, and it's willing to reward you for it. And not always just financially. It could be recognition, right? But maybe that's really what purpose is, those pieces. So maybe let's look at somebody, if anybody, anybody know who this guy is? Right? See, do you think he has talent? Right? But what was his talent? Right? I purposely, this is some guy in a suit. Right? What is his talent? Anybody know what his talent really is? What is it? Commercials, right? Yeah, commercials. I say that his talent was he was an analyst. He discovered early that his talent was observation and analyst. And I remember hearing him a lot of times, he'd say, I may not have the best physical attributes, but I'm going to out-prepare you. He was an analyst. And then once he understood that he was an analyst and that was his real talent, then he was looking for a framework to put some skills on top of it. He came from a football family, so he had an opportunity to learn skill, football, right? So he had his talent, and he developed his skill, right? Training and focus and discipline, all these pieces, right? These are all attributes of his talent, right? He put it on top of his skill, and he pointed it at a problem that he cared about. And I remember listening to it one time, he said, Peyton, you do all this football, and you make all this money, but why are you constantly doing this thing with the children's thing, you're traveling all over the country? He said, well, I feel like I have this responsibility. I have this platform, right, that's unique, and I have a responsibility, right, to go out there and share my story and my thoughts, right, to change the world. That's the only way I can do it. And I have this huge responsibility, and that's the problem he wanted to solve, right? He wanted to change the world, make the world a better place, right, by bringing his talent and skills to the table, right? So that was the problem that he was going after, right? And I believe the world recognized him for that, right? The world needs that. It needs people that inspires us, right? We don't necessarily need Hall of Fame football players or quarterbacks, which we know he'll be one, right? And reward, he was rewarded financially, but I don't ever remember any interview or anything ever talking about Peyton Manning about the money, right? Well, I'm trying to figure out which one of these teams I'm going to go to. Who's going to pay me the most money? It was who's going to give me the best opportunity to win, because he was a winner, and that was also part of his drive. I just like this picture, right? And one of the best villains out there. You're going to have that villain, right? You might want to have that villain. This guy also has a lot of talent, right? And but here's the thing, right? So you sharpen the sword with a stone, right? This guy was probably, him and his team's probably responsible for sharpening our stone a lot, right? When you sharpen a stone with butter, you sharpen it with a stone, right? A little friction, a little struggle, some problems, right? Right? That tension is what created that. And I feel just completely blessed that we had the opportunity to watch both of these people compete, right? So who's your favorite team? Well, the Colts and whoever's beating New England. Right? I'm going to be in Boston next week, so I'm going to be getting my best Colts stuff, right? But, we're getting there, right? We're going to get there, right? So, who's this guy? Gene Wilder, right? So before, you're probably saying, well, where's the human capital analytics, right? You're talking about all this stuff, where's the analytics? And I think before we can talk about the analytics, it's not about what we're going to gather or what we're going to gather or how we're going to gather it, but why are we gathering it, right? The human part, the why are we going to gather this human analytics? And if we're going to talk about things that we're going to gather, we're probably going to talk about things that might be private to people, right? And while maybe regulatory-wise, some of the things that we gather doesn't have any regulatory rules around them, right? It's still personal. And so I always think of Gene Wilder, all these things going on in the world, all this connected and data privacies. I saw an interview that, on YouTube or somewhere. I've been trying to find it for 3 years. I saw it about 3 years ago. Now, some of you may remember, Willy Wonka, the better one, right, the original, that one, right? And then also he was married, who was he married to? An SNL comedian, right? And they had a really, interesting marriage, and then she passed away from breast cancer, right? It was young, right? It was shocking. And so the interview was an interview between this reporter and him. He didn't do a lot of interviews, but everyone kind of wanted to know all the juicy details. And so he finally is going to do this interview, and the reporter says, well, is it okay if I ask you some personal questions? And he got it, I think, in his best Willy Wonka, right? He's like, you absolutely can ask me personal questions. You just can't ask me any private ones. The reporter's like, well, what's the difference? He said, well, a personal question is something that I choose personally to share. And I can share that, I have a choice. But something that's private is between me and someone else. And if they're not here to have a choice, I can't violate that trust of privacy. And you wouldn't want to be part of that either, right? Reporter's like, right. Right? And I always think of, when we start looking at the things that we gather in the data that we have, we've always got to look at what is this as personal, right? And always got to have a choice to share what is personal for people. And then as people who may hold that personal information, we have to be diligent on protecting that privacy from others, right? So a lot of the analytics and things that we're working on is really, I always tell this philosophy when I talk to the team, is how we should look at how this data is moved around. So let's get into some of this analytics. So if I'm going to share something personal, I might as well share mine, right? So everything here, this is just me. I'm laying it out there, right? This is me. And so it'd be kind of interesting. These are my core values. It's really great hearing your guys' values. By the way, my values are great because they spell great. That's how I remember them. Right? Genuine and authentic. I may not be the most polished, right? But I will be the most genuine and authentic. I know my intentions, right? Respect and responsibility. I know that as a leader, I have to respect the responsibility that I have, right? That's really important to me. Enthusiastic encouragement, right? You gotta, the whole world beats you up all the time, right? Everybody gets beat up. We gotta find a way to lift each other up, right? So let's just always encourage. Always growing, right? Never, progress, not perfection, just always. It's interesting, I'm listening to yours, and I was like, hey, we're right there, right? We're right there together. And then team supported. No one likes to be alone. I promise you the worst times of your life, right? The times that seem that you're the lowest is when you're really alone. And the times that seem to be your greatest joy was probably when you're with others. So being team supported. Where do I spend my time? Spend a lot of time working, kind of a little workaholic a little bit. My family and friends. Homesteading, 4 dogs. No, 2 dogs, 2 dogs, 4 cats, 12 chickens. 11 hens, 1 rooster. We didn't know he was a rooster when we got him. 20,000 honeybees and other things, right? I read 3 books at once, always. It always depends on how the day went. If it really sucked, I go with the fantasy stuff or something, right? But grow up with some of those others, right? But those are some of those things about me, right? So you think about things that are being gathered on as the individual. These are things that I'm sharing that we actually gather, that we think are important. Mindset. So often, our personality's probably been the same since 6th grade. You've just been seasoning that thing. But what's really moved is your mindset. So if we're going to gather some data on analytics, why don't we gather the mindset, how people think, right? What some of those things might be, right? Giving feedback to the individual. Remember, you're trying to identify what some of your talents are, and part of it is where's your mindset as it is today. If we're going to measure mindset, we're going to dig a little bit deeper. Where are we at on emotional intelligence? Right? Here in the middle is not a behavior. To the left is I don't believe in it. I don't execute that behavior. And to the right, I do. Right? So you can actually see by the way, this isn't me. This is our whole team. Right? But the ability to see where you are on emotional intelligence. Right? Career readiness is another one that we look at. Right? Not only where the individual is, but where the individual wants to go, right? So not only where they are, but where they want to go, right? So what their intentions are, where they're trying to improve, right? Get to the truth there. And maybe not only where they are, but where they want to go, but how do they compare to their peers, right? So they look for some of those alignments, right? A lot of times, a lot of the conflict that we have, right? Sometimes it's just a different mindset. We're just trying to see it, right? How can we flesh it out, right? And sometimes it's just getting a little bit of data and taking a look at it, right? Not only for the individual, right? The more you understand what's between your ears, the more prepared you are to take on, to understand what some of those talents and skills and interactions and collaboration that you need. And the more that you understand others and how they look at things. And I'll cover that in a second. I'm trying to get better with this clicker. This is me, right? This might be another measurement, right? I'm a high D, a high drive. They call it the CEO marker, right? A very directive. People, right? The I piece there, that's relatively high as well. Steady, support. I like to see people supported. Pretty low on compliance, except for my taxes. Just thought I'd put that out there. Been audited. But low compliance, I am a rule breaker. I'm always like, well, why is this rule here? How long has this rule been around? Right? I'm pushing the rules all the time. Right? I know this about myself. Imagine if you knew what some of these were for you. It's like there's no rhyme or reason to this thing. Modus operandi, my instincts. Right? I would put in a corner. How do I work? Fact finder. Summarize it, please. Do not send me this email. I kind of glaze over it. I tell my team, is somebody write down about 3 or 5 things, please, right? I can't get into details. Other people love the details, right? And when I see that, I see that they're high on details, I'll pause for a moment and make sure I let them get their detail out, right? Okay, I'll meet you halfway, right? It's a little hard, I'll get you there, right? The other one, follow through. I'm not follow through. I'm looking for someone to do the work. I want to delegate, right? There's other people at the end of the day, they just love it. They love it. They love those tasks and check them out. Great, I love them, right? I need to be surrounded by them, right? So I have something to delegate to. Could you take care of this, please? Quick start, squirrel, right? I'm off the charts. I've only met one other 9, right? But I know the ability to take action and iterate along the way, right? I will take risk, right? You know, if you look at my whole career, entrepreneur, you know, taking on these things, and we'll figure it out, right? I don't have any money right now, we'll figure out how to pay for it, but we're going to solve this problem. Where are you going? Implementer, this last one is really how I see things. There's a little OCD, things have to look a certain way, right? So how that comes out, that all comes through in maybe this measurement here. Another way maybe looking at me, right? So these are kind of my core strengths. Relator, individualization, positivity, activator, woo, right? It gives me energy, right, to influence others, right? See this thing. But notice executing and strategic thinking is not kind of my area. So what is it? You're the average of the 5 people that you surround yourself with. I promise you, on my team, they're over there, right? I need their help, right? I recognize that that's not my area. That's not my real strength, right? So I'm going to play my strengths, and I want to enable them to play their strengths, and we're going to come to a good place, right? So the ability to see what some of those strengths are. Personality, right? Some of the Myers-Briggs, people may have heard of that. This one's actually the 16 personalities. It's free. I'm an INFJ, only 1% of the population. Right? Kind of called the diplomat. A lot of people are surprised to see how introverted I am, right? That their expectation is something different. But I know that I need to get on the stage. I need to hear that feedback to solve the problems that I want to be part of solving, right? And so these are things I know I have to do to get that, right? But it's energy, and I have to recharge and get into those things. And a lot of things I do, my gut instincts, right? So I see some of that. But the ability to not only see all these things in myself, right, and know myself, right? But is also this piece around what my values are and how I say no, right? Saying yes is so easy, but no is extremely powerful. You define who you are by what you say no to, not what you say yes to. And that's really where some of these values and all this stuff starts to come together, right? Anybody remember Lehman Brothers? Bankruptcy? Lehman Brothers? No? Yeah, okay. Anybody ever wonder where all that stuff went? The west side of Indianapolis is where it went, I know, because me and 8 people took that on for the global infrastructure, and we went from 8 people to 600 people in 5 months. I gained 100 pounds, about killed me, right? We took that on, but it was a great project, and I actually said no 4 times. And it was us, an 8-person company in Indiana, and it was we were going against IBM and EDS and Hewlett Packard, right? And then us 8. And I kept telling them no. They kept saying, no, we want you to be part of this project. And I was like, no, why would you do that with us? No, I don't think so. And then they would call back, well, we changed it so that problem you had is now a yes. And I'd find another no, right? And then they changed it again, right? They're so used to hearing yes, right? But by saying no, they were kind of like, well, whoa, what do they know that maybe we don't know, right? And they started leaning in, and really our intention was doing the right thing. It wasn't about the money, it was about what was the right thing to solve this problem and be part of that, right? A lot of times when you say yes, there's this thing I like to think of as obligations and commitments, right? When you say yes all the time, you become over-obligated, and you don't have any space for your commitments, right? Because commitments is the problems that you care about, right? It's the problems that you care about. So that's really important, and you got to have those values, right? Individual values and organizational values. The ability to see that from a data standpoint, we think is really important. It'd be interesting if it was all in one place. This is not my resume, but this is all that in one place, right? Where not only I can see it, but we believe that you have the individual, you have their affiliations and advisors, right? Maybe you were in college and you had a career coach. Maybe you're at work and you have a manager, right? And the idea is, can we get all this in one place and we look at it together? Not this, right, but this. And how can I understand myself better and how I interact and go in with others in the group, right? So this is all in one spot, right? And then the ability to actually aggregate that up, right, and see that across all these different factors. There's lots of analytics, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, but I didn't want to go into too much. But I knew they had a lot of auditors, and so I'm sorry, but I didn't use an Excel. I'm going to throw some Excel spreadsheets in there. But I couldn't. But I did want you to see that there is a tremendous amount of opportunity around the data and what we're gathering, and why we're gathering some of this data. Right? Culture map, right? The ability to actually see where you are against these measurements and see not only where the group is, but where it wants to go, right? So some of us be able to map some of that information. And at the end of the day, how are we enabling the advisors and you to really look at something, define what it is, it's an insight. And instead of it being, well, the coach has one piece of information and the other person has, it should be all transparent. We should be looking at it together. Again, we should be looking at it together, right? There's no combat here, right? It's collaborative, trying to make things better. So, I started this out, I was talking about looking at this big galaxy and how big it was, but how I still felt like I was part of something that was significant. And actually, I was sending a note over to the commissioner, and I was trying to get to some of the things that you guys do and see if any of that its level of significance. So my understanding is 685 full-time and seasonal staff and 1.5 million hours of work. It's a lot of work. 1.5 million hours of work annually. $20.9 billion, which is an all-time high, 6% increase. 2,000 audits. I would actually say I was surprised. I thought there would be more audits, so I'm proud to be one of the 2,000. Almost $1 million covered by investigators, and think about how the coordination they have to do across the state. 4.8 million taxpayers, 3.7 million returns. I assume some of them are married. That was the math in me. Over 600,000 phone calls. Goodness gracious, that's a lot of phone calls. Right? And I'm sure they're all just so excited to talk to you. 1.24 billion returned to Indiana taxpayers, and in days, not online, 12 days, and on paper, 35 days. 685 people, billions of dollars, right? That is an amazing thing. But let's not get too wrapped up in just the numbers. So let me tell you one story before I finish up here. So the last 4 years I had an opportunity to run a nonprofit. And it was my opportunity to give back. I never run a nonprofit before. And so we really wanted to close this skills gap. So as a nonprofit, didn't have any money, so I had to go raise some money. And one of them was this innovation grant from the Department of Workforce Development. And we had the team work really hard, and we got, I want to say, $800,000 in that grant. And then I actually got that grant matched, so about $1.6 million. And we worked really hard to try to understand what this gap was for people on skills and other things. And we spent a lot of money and effort, coordination, hundreds of companies. And one of the things we did, I love a fast yes. My second favorite thing is a fast no, right? So here's the little thing. Every time those salesperson calls you, right, and they kind of putting the press on you and say, hey, I want to give you a gift. I'm going to give you the gift of a fast no so that you can see a fast yes for you. They're like, thank you. So love fast no. And so what we did, we created this badging system. We bring people into our program. It's kind of 500 hours, right? Really intense. And we had these badges. And I always said to the instructors, if someone finishes our program and is not successful, you're part of the problem. You should not have let them get that far without being ready to be successful. And so the instructors really took that serious. And so before that first badge, right, about 3 weeks in, they'd always meet with the person about halfway through and kind of give them some really wrong feedback. And I always say, if you're going to give feedback, there's 3 things that you always have to follow. And I think this is the same that I heard the commissioner speaking. T and K. The first thing is, it should be true. You have to ask yourself, if this feedback I'm giving, is it true or my opinion? Right? Is it true? The second thing is it necessary? Sometimes things are true and it's not necessary to tell them. Right? Is it necessary? And the last thing, which costs nothing, is it kind? Right? Is it kind? So we had this one incident happen. So my instructors hated giving this feedback because it was so painful for them because they were held to this high standard of feedback. And so this gentleman came in, he was in the program, and the head instructor, great guy, his name was Paul. Paul says, I don't think you're going to complete the program. And the guy says, what do you mean? I'm the smartest guy in the class, right? I know all the material. Paul said, no. One, you are pretty bright. Your personal hygiene, it's not there. It's not where it really need to be. And you are smart, but you're abrasive. And you constantly are belittling others and using that knowledge as a weapon instead of a gift and helping them. Nobody wants to work with you, right? Because you're abrasive, right? And I fear that while you can still do the work, right? You may have the skills, per se, but you haven't understand the talent and the ability to collaborate with others and solve problems. And that's what the world really needs out there. I don't think you're hireable as it sits today. Now, this is on a Friday. And this person listened to that, and they were hurt. And they had the tears in the bottom of their eyes, and they were like, okay. They walked out of the room, and I can tell you that person was hurt, but Paul, tear him up, Every Friday, I'd have to take him to lunch. Be all right, man. It's gonna be okay. So Monday comes in, this individual comes in, got a new haircut, shaved his beard off, looked like a pirate. Shaved his beard off. Nothing against pirates. Taking a bath, clean clothes, not new clothes, but clean clothes, right? Now, I'm supposed to tell the story of the number one person and all this other thing. Finished in the top half of the class. And graduation was there with their fiance and the parents. You never saw anyone so proud. They were him, right? So he comes up to Paul and he says, hey, I gotta thank you. He said, no one had the courage to just tell me. I just didn't know. I didn't know that these were problems. And that's one of our biggest challenges today is sometimes we just need the courage. You give real good feedback for the right reasons, right? For the right reasons. And I tell that story, and it means a lot to me personally, right? Because as I looked over the last 4 years running that nonprofit, I wanted to think the next thing I wanted to do, what I really wanted to do was something that involved people finding their purpose, right? Because I just saw it over and over again, and that was my way of bringing my talents and skills together, that I might be able to change the world a little bit. One of the challenges I think today with being so hyper-connected is everybody wants to change the world. Why don't we just start with 100 yards? Why don't you start with the person next to you? Let's just start right there. So that's really where I got this thing where I'm going to go make another run. I'm going to make a run at purposely. The reason I tell you that problem is I really want to thank you, right? Because that would not have happened without those dollars that flow through you into those programs. That individual would not have been there without the $4,500 subsidy that we were able to do, because he had not found a job, right? He'd been unemployed for 3 or 4 years, right? You probably know why, right? Some of those things. But it was the things that you do that bring the resources to make programs like that happen and inspire me to do these other things that I'm doing that I hope that inspires others. So you can look at all of the numbers, but I believe, regardless of the billions of dollars, there's a million stories that you enable, right? There really is. And I know that you don't get thanked enough, right? Sure, I will admit I don't usually tap my toes or anything or skip when I see the letter, right? but do know that you are appreciated. You do make a difference, right? And you are significant. So with that, I'd like to click this clicker, right? And thank you.